Welcome back to another episode of What to Do When, and today we are going into what to do when you feel left out or rejected and you start spiraling, aka why don't you like me? If you have ever thought that sentence, this is the episode for you to normalize, listen to, understand, and figure the frick out how to shift out of this and more into being who you are instead of abandoning yourself constantly to be liked or to fit in. So you know how there are these freaking magical unicorn people in the world who are so bloody authentically themselves. They're so niche. They're into such bizarre things. They have such specific hobbies, likes, dislikes. They get weird with things. They say no when they don't want to do something. They only do what they want to do, and they don't fake liking or being into other things in order to be liked or to be approved of. They're just themselves. Even if it means that they're a bit of a loner or maybe they have a smaller circle of friends, they're so damn comfortable with themselves and who they are. You know those people? Yeah, that is not me. That is not me. And if that's you, this is the wrong episode for you to be listening or watching. This episode's not for you. This episode is for the exact opposite of what I just said. I am not one of those people. I am an overthinker who has a deep, damn core wound and desire and need to be liked by everyone. I cannot tell you how many weird things I've pretended to be into or excited about or spent money on in order to be liked more, in order to fit in with a group of people that I probably don't even like, or in order to have maybe someone that I'm dating think that I'm extra cool and that we have something in common. I cannot tell you how many of those things I have done, been to, experienced, where that has been so far from the truth of who I am and what I like. I can't tell you how many times I've done that. This episode is for my fellow overthinkers who scream and up late at night rehashing conversations, thinking of all the things they should have done differently, over-analyzing every single thing and interaction that they've had throughout that day, and secretly thinking, why don't you like me? How do I get you to like me more? This episode's for you. If you want to be someone who stops spiraling when you are rejected or left out, if you want to be someone who's more comfortable with who you are and showing people who you are, this is the episode for you. We're going to go through this together, and I have to say, I'm right freaking here alongside you. This is something that keeps me up late at night often, and it's something and a part of me that I often have to really sit with and work with and do self-therapy and paid therapy with in order to not let it rule my life. Because it did. For such a long time, I was that person who faked interest in so many things that I didn't like in order not to be left out of the group. I was a bit of a loner as a kid for a while. I often felt left out. And so when I became a teenager, and especially my late teens, early 20s, I had these multiple friend groups through work and through school friends and through other friends. And I swear to God, I was a different person inside of each friend group. And they didn't match up with, none of them were me. None of them were actually who I was. I was pretending the entire time. And I was constantly abandoning myself to fit in. And this is something that I've had to work so hard on. And it's also been something that's been so rewarding to work so hard on. And the reason that I want you to sit here and listen to this episode is because if you're someone who is walking that path that I also walked, and sometimes still walk, if I'm honest, it is painful. The constant self-abandonment hurts. It means that you end up doing things that don't feel right to you. I ended up drinking and partying so many times when I didn't want to and it didn't feel right to me. I ended up spending so much money on countless stupid things that I didn't want to go to. I went traveling to places I didn't want to go. I even walked down career paths that I had no interest in. That's the danger of being someone who has a massive, I wonder if we can call it FOLO, fear of being left out or fear of being rejected. If you're someone with that wound and that part of you, if you're not careful, it can lead you to a massive identity crisis later in life because you have no idea who you really are. You've spent your whole life chameleoning, you've spent your whole life shape-shifting to fit in with others. And so when you do lose people in your life, when maybe you go through a breakup, maybe your friendships start to evolve or move on, maybe people move away, you end up in this awful place where you have no idea who the frick you are. And it's so horrible because you end up feeling this sense of, I'm not good enough as I am, and I also don't know who I am, and I need to figure it out. And it often happens way later than it should. We go through the identity building phase in our development and our likes and our interests in our teenage years. If we don't go through that experience in that time, if we have blockages in that moment and we end up, like so many of us do, shrinking ourselves in order to fit in and to be liked, it then leads you to be this adult who has this looming fear of being rejected for who you are. And so you hide who you are. You hide it from the people you love. You hide it from the people you don't love. You hide it from the people who you don't even like. And you end up being and living as a person who feels completely disconnected to others. It hits on your relationships and your friendships. I remember having this night in the car one day after a massive weekend of partying, and I had been surrounded by people the entire weekend. I'd been surrounded by people. I'd been hugged, I'd been laughed with, we had a great time. And I walked away from that, and I remember sitting in the car outside my house, outside my flat at the time, and I sat in the car for over an hour. And I was having this whole crisis of like, do they even know who I am? Like, do they know the real me? And I was having this crisis and this conflict inside of myself because I desperately wanted to be loved and liked for me at my core and who I really am, terrified of them actually seeing who I am and potentially rejecting me or not liking me. I remember sitting in the car for over an hour, and these were close friends that I spent a lot of time with, and it was a very, very, very heartbreaking couple of years when I hit my version of rock bottom and had to be and become more of who I am. And I could no longer pretend to like the things that I was liking. I could no longer drink and party the evening away because my body was breaking down. My anxiety was through the roof, and I was having panic attacks when people would come over to the house and were drinking at our house because I was so petrified of what they would be thinking about me. And it was an awful moment in my life. And what happened was all of those relationships ended up falling away, and it was terrifying. It was terrifying to go from being this person who was surrounded by people constantly to feeling like I had no one, to feeling like who I actually am isn't good enough, and they didn't actually like me this whole time. And now I only have one or two friends who actually love and support me for who I am. It was an awful moment. Of course, that wasn't the true reality of what the moment was. It was my story and my perception in my pain of what it felt like. And looking back at that moment, I wish I would have done so many things differently, and I wished that I had the language to have been able to share with people what I was really going through, and I wish that I'd had the courage to let them in and to let them see me, because I think some of it would have turned out differently, but I didn't at the time. I had none of that. And that's often the case. Versus now, life is so different and my relationships are so different. The people that are in my life know and love me for exactly who I am. The messy, overthinking, anxious, emotional, determined person that I am, who has so many different facets to her personality. They know and they like me and they love me for who I am. And those relationships and that closeness that we have and the vulnerability that's come with that, oh my God, it has been fucking terrifying and also exhilarating and the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So I want to talk about today, I want to break this all down. I want to talk about what to do when you are someone that spirals when you feel potential rejection or you feel left out. We're going to talk about today why rejection hits so hard. We're going to talk about what's happening inside of that spiral. We're going to talk about how to interrupt the spiral and how to do the real work so that you can be someone who stops abandoning themselves in order to be liked and in order to be loved, so that you can be loved for who you are, because you deserve it, baby. You really, really do. So let's dive in. Actually, I'm reading my notes here and I have to say, one of the the themes of this episode that I hope comes through today is learning to hold rejection without losing yourself is one of the most important skills that you can develop over your lifetime. And not just for your relationships and your friendships, but for your career, for your side hustles, for all the things that you want to do in your life. I'm someone that is regularly putting myself out of my comfort zone on social media. I run this podcast, I post a lot of content, and it's so scary, the idea of being rejected for that content. And it has been so tempting, and I've done it many, many times, to alter the content or the message that I'm sharing and to put it in a more digestible package that is trendy and aesthetic and looks like what everyone else is doing and how everyone else is sounding. There's been so many moments where I have abandoned my authentic nature and who I am in that content creation, in the creation of this podcast, in my business, in my side hustles, in my career, in my jobs, professionally, where I've done that. And it's been so heartbreaking because I abandoned my actual sense of authenticity and the message that I want to share. But it's really, really freaking easy to do. If you're someone that posts content on social media, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's so easy to try and fit in with the trends than it is to actually inquire, who am I? What do I stand for? What's my message? How do I want to deliver it in my way? So much harder because of that potential rejection coming up. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the two facets of how it applies. And I see this applying to your professional life, and I also see it applying to your friendships and relationships. Rejection is a massive part of life. It is also a massive expander and a massive thing that makes you grow. It really, really does. And rejection really is redirection. So let's talk about it. Why does rejection hit so hard for some people? And again, I'm reminded of these amazing people in the world who are not fazed by rejection, who can go up to someone at a bar and ask them out, get rejected on the spot, come back like nothing's gone wrong, who can apply for a job that they are so unqualified for, and they'll call them up, right? They'll call them up and be like, hey, I put my application, blah, 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 and they'll get rejected, no biggie. They'll go for opportunities. They'll post the content. They will start the side hustle. And they don't care. They don't care if they get rejected. All they care about is getting one step closer to their dreams, to continuing on that path. And I'm about to grab this microphone and shake it. I wish that I was that person, and I'm sure that you wish that you were this person too. But for me, and maybe for you if you're here listening, rejection is a core wound of mine, and maybe it's a core wound of yours. For me, this rejection comes from growing up without a dad. And for many, many, many years, I felt that sense of abandonment and rejection from my father, from this father figure that was supposed to love me unconditionally and who chose not to be in my life. That story that I created around that at such a young age carried with me throughout the rest of my life. And it hit heavy in the way that I saw myself and the way that I saw the world. And it made me, the pain of feeling that, especially as a young child, and not understanding why, right? Not understanding the bigger context of what was going on for him and why it might have been a good thing that he wasn't in my life. Not understanding that context and just feeling that pain as a kid was awful. And I know that it's actually a very common experience for us to feel a sense of rejection or abandonment by a parent or a caregiver, no matter if they were actually there and present with you, but maybe they were emotionally unavailable, or maybe they were just really inconsistent. Maybe you grew up in a traumatic household, maybe you had both parents, maybe you had none, maybe you had one. Who knows what that experience was like for you? But a fear of rejection and abandonment is a very, very, very common thing to experience. And the reason that we carry this fear is not only amplified by what we experienced and the personal wounds that we carry from our childhood experiences, then we've also got our adult experiences in life, heartbreak. One of the most painful things to go through. People die from broken hearts, from that fear of rejection, from that sense of rejection. We then also have the biological impact on what's actually happening. We are ultimately, and this is something that I hope that you understand about yourself and about what it means to be human. You know how they always say that humans aren't meant to be alone. They're meant to be in connection. And that's true. Human beings are designed to live in tribes. Human beings are designed to be part of a pack. And the reason for this is because it's much, much, much better odds of survival to be living with people than it is to be outcast on our own. Our bodies and our brains at their most primal senses are about survival. Our number one instinct that we have in our body and in our brain, our core automatic responses, are about survival. They are about surviving. The best way to survive is to be part of a pack, part of a tribe, part of a group that can protect you from threats, right? And if we think about cave people days, we're thinking about real physical threats, right? We're thinking about staying warm in the winter. We're thinking about gathering food. It's much easier if we've got a whole group doing this. We're also thinking about protecting from, say, other people, or being protected from animals. And in today's world, that's very, very different, right? But there still is a sense of that we all live with, that we're safer in a group. We're safer when we're connected to other people and to other humans. That is why we see so many mental health struggles when we're isolated, right? When we are cut off. And again, I'm thinking about COVID, I'm thinking about lockdowns, I'm thinking about that isolation so many people went through. When we're disconnected, our bodies do something. Our bodies start to freak the fuck out. They start to panic, they start to be worried, they start to be scared because you're on your own. It is much harder to survive on your own than it is with a group. And so we not only have our childhood wounds and experiences with rejection, which, if we're honest, I'm sure you can pull upon a painful experience of rejection as a child, whether it's, asking someone out when you were 12 years old and getting rejected, your first heartbreak, whether it's a parent, whether it's trauma in your childhood, maybe you grew up with neglect or inconsistent affection, or maybe you grew up with the idea of conditional love instead of unconditional. And you probably learned really, really early on that connection wasn't guaranteed. And so that does something to us. If you experienced that when you were young, and I think we all have at least minor experiences of rejection when we're young, that changes something within us. It changes because of the biological impact that I was speaking about before. We start to find ways to meet that need of connection and to minimize that risk of rejection. We start to find ways to do that. And those ways are things like people pleasing, abandoning yourself, liking things that you think other people like, trying to fit in, walking the career path that maybe your parents wanted for you that you don't want for you. There's so many examples of this. And it's tough because we kind of learn this message that in order to not be rejected and to feel that fear of what it feels like, think about how awful it feels to feel rejected, right? Like even now I can think about how terrible it feels to be rejected. And it's a really just awfully uncomfortable human experience to go through, but it's important. We think about all the ways in which we can minimize that rejection, and we come up with all of these strategies in order to be able to connect and to guarantee safety and connection. And some of those strategies are not helping you and not serving you, namely the people pleasing, namely abandoning yourself, mainly pretending to be someone that you aren't. And I know that this all probably sounds really, really dramatic, but the point that I want to hit home here is that to your body, potential rejection, it feels dramatic. It feels like I'm going to die if this person rejects me. That's what's happening inside your body when somebody changes their tone in their text message, or somebody stops replying to you, and you just feel this awful sense of anxiety coming over you that I've done something wrong, or maybe they don't like me anymore, or maybe you find out, oh God, I remember experiencing this so many times in my teens, but you find out that you weren't invited to a party or to a hangout and you're crushed, right? You absolutely crushed. And so this is the point that I just want to hit home with you, is that if you are someone that fears rejection in all sense of the word, because remember, rejection isn't just about fearing being rejected by people and your friends and your relationships and your romantic relationships. It's also about that fear, that wider fear of rejection, of going after your dreams, right? And doing those big things and being seen for who you are. And again, if you're not careful, you'll end up living as someone or pretending to be someone that you're not. And you'll also end up not going after the things that you really want. So let's dive into what's actually happening inside that spiral that goes on when you start to when you start to smell that you might be about to get rejected, right? You might be about to have someone, maybe someone that you're dating, maybe they start getting weird and you're like, oh my God, and you start freaking out. Maybe one of your friends starts getting a bit sketchy and you're like, oh God, what have I done? Maybe, you put out this application for a really cool job and they haven't gotten back to you in like 2 weeks and you're freaking out, right? And I want to break down what's happening inside that spiral for you in terms of our parts. And again, if you're new here, parts theory is what I work in, and this theory is about that we have multiple parts of our persona. We have multiple parts of ourselves. If you think about the analogy of, angel and devil sitting on your shoulder, you've got one part of you that wants to do this and one part of you that wants to do that. We have all these different parts of ourselves that exist. When we go into a spiral like that, when we're freaking out about being rejected, it's not just you that's running the show in your head. The reason that we feel such panic and anxiety and we, get this sort of rush and sense of I don't know what to do is because there's so many different parts of you that come up in that moment from your past experiences. So you might have, for me, I mentioned the example of having the inner child in me who felt abandoned and who just feels this desperate yearning to be chosen. And so when I go into that spiral in that moment, that child who was abandoned by her father comes up and she thinks, oh my God, this person's going to leave me or reject me, and that's going to be really painful. What can I do or who can I be to bring them closer? You might have a part of you that we can call, the people pleaser who tries to keep everything smooth. A really common experience of this is whenever you start to feel tension. A lot of people pleasers really resonate with being very energetically attuned, i.e. you're quite sensitive to the vibe of the room or the vibe of the place, and you can feel when things go off. But really that's just this hypervigilance because you're freaking the fork out and you're trying to minimize that risk of rejection. And so when you sense that, when you sense some tension in the room, you start to try and smooth things over and people please and get everything to go back to being calm again so that you don't feel like you're being rejected again. And then we have a classic. We have another part of you that comes up in that spiral who is the inner critic. And I think so many of us live with this, and it's such a hard part of you because it feels awful to criticize yourself. It feels awful to be in this space and you start blaming yourself for everything that went wrong. So somebody that you're dating and it's going really, really well, and then they decide they want to end it, and you just sit there and you berate and blame yourself for every single thing that you've done wrong. You beat yourself up, right? Maybe your friend cancels plans. Again, you beat yourself up. Maybe you don't get the job. Maybe your video doesn't go viral or someone makes a nasty comment on it. And again, you start to beat yourself up. So we have all these parts of you and your psyche that were likely formed so young when you did have to deal with rejection, when you did have to deal with being left out, which we all, let's be honest, we all have experiences like that. And they do shape us. They do impact us as adults because it's primed within us in order to be liked. How do you deal with rejection? How do you deal with being left out? I really want you, and this is why self-awareness is so important, because if you're not aware of what's happening, if you're not aware of what parts of you are running the show, you're going to be a 30-year-old people pleaser. You're going to end up in relationships that you don't love. You're going to end up living in the way that, 7-year-old you got kids to like them and play with them on the playground by liking the game that they were playing. You're going to end up living that out for the rest of your life, and you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be content. You're not going to create the life that you want. This is why this question is important for you to know. How do you deal with rejection? What happens when you feel like you're going to be rejected? Do you blame yourself? Do you try and fix it? Do you try and be like someone that they like? Do you try and do, great example for me, I often try and do something funny. I often try and make a joke. And that's something, again, to try and smooth things over and to try and get that connection back and minimize that risk of rejection. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it? What comes up? Think about it. I'm going to also drop in the show notes from the last episode. I created a parts mapping guided exercise. It's about 10 to 15 minutes. It's fantastic. You can use that exercise to do this as well by thinking about an example of when you felt rejected or when you felt abandoned or when you felt left out and you go into this massive spiral. Why don't you like me? This will be a great exercise for you to do now. But what happens for you? What parts of you come up in that moment of rejection, in that moment of feeling like you've been left out? Who do you become? The story that we have to sit with and the questions that we have to ask are freaking deep and freaking heavy. But these are important. If you have a pen and a paper, now will be a great time. If you just want to think about these questions, now would be a great time to do so. But whatever you do, don't switch off. Don't switch off at this little bit of a hard moment, because it's important to sit with. Who did you need to be liked and to be loved as a child? Thinking about those early relationships, thinking about what did you need to do, who did you need to be for your parents or caregivers or siblings or wider family or teachers to be proud of you? What did you learn about yourself that was good, and what did you learn about yourself that was bad? What did you learn that you could do to get more connection, and what did you learn to minimize within yourself to minimize that potential rejection? Example from me that I hope can maybe spark something from you is really early on I learned that being smart but not too smart, being funny, being a bit of a performer, being entertaining, being a good listener, asking people questions, these are all things that I learned as a young person that got me more connection. And so those are things that whenever I feel like I'm going to be rejected, or if I'm feeling a bit insecure or left out, maybe I walk into a friend's birthday party or something and I've not met many people before, my automatic sense is to go in and to be this funny, shiny, sparkly version of myself that is deeply interested in other people. And there's a part of that is really authentic to me, and then there's a part where I switch it and it becomes really inauthentic. And it's because it's coming from fear, and from a fear of not being liked, rather than a genuine curiosity. And that is something that I've had to do a lot of work on, has been getting to a place within myself where I feel that I'm good enough as I am, and that I can survive being rejected. I can survive that. As a child, I learned that my emotions and my sensitivity, they pushed people away. They disconnected me from people, and they set off that panic because I would end up isolated. I would end up in my room by myself when I was really, really upset to deal with it. As you can imagine, that felt awful. It felt awful, and it felt scary, and it felt dangerous. So what did I learn as a young child? I learned to bury my emotions and my reactivity and my sensitivity. And I learned to put on a brave face, and I learned to deal with things on my own. I learned to be this hyper independent person who could deal with her own problems and who didn't need anyone. And it so sucked to be an adult who lived that way. And it ruined my relationships. I was never close to anyone. I never felt loved, and I never felt worthy of love. And I'm so grateful that it's so different now. But I had to ask myself and look at all those ways in which I was pushing real love and connection away, keeping myself at a distance to keep myself safe from being hurt again. And this is something that we all do. It's built into us to protect ourselves from our pain. And if we're not careful, if we don't understand and check and become aware of that and actually think, is this actually helping me? Am I keeping everything inside and putting on a brave face? Is that actually helping me live the life I want and have the relationships I want? Or is it actually harming me? And I think we all know the answer to that. So ask yourself those questions. Get clear on who you needed to be in order to be liked. What story in your head sits there about people reject me when I? Like, finish that sentence. People reject me when I am. People like me when I. Do some work and finish those sentences. Hit pause now if you need. Now, before I wrap up this episode, I always like to give you something to do, because this podcast is called What to Do When. We've gone over a lot of breaking down what's happening with a fear of rejection and a fear of not being liked or being left out. We've gone through what's happening in the spiral. We've gone through what self-awareness and what questions you need to explore. What we haven't gone through is what are you going to do? So I have a challenge for you. I have a challenge for you. Should you accept it? Should you choose to accept it? It's a version of something that you might have seen, that there are people who go through what's called rejection therapy, and they essentially try to get good at being rejected. And to try and it's a form of exposure therapy. You expose yourself to being rejected multiple times, and so that it's no longer as scary, right? That version, oh my God, that sounds terrifying. So I don't want you to do that. If you want to, you go for it. But I want to give you a smaller version of this to do. I want you to think about three things that you have been holding back on because you've been afraid of being rejected. This could be telling someone about something or having a specific conversation or setting a boundary. It could be a job that you've wanted to apply for, or a side hustle you've wanted to start, piece of social media content. It could be anything. But think about some of those things and those dreams that you have that you kind of are holding back on a little bit. I want you to think of 3 things, and I want you to try and label them as one easy thing, one medium thing, and one hard thing. And I want you to create this as a notes app in your phone and write these down. I want you to find something easy that you can, something low risk, right? And this might just literally be telling a friend about something that you're struggling with. That's light, that's easy, but still you want to tell them. This could be going to ask someone out. That is one of my dreams that I have at the moment is, or one of my challenges, my version that's on this list at the moment is going to ask someone out in public. Haven't done it yet. Super afraid. One of my other things was speed dating, and we did that. Disaster, but we did it. But I want you to think about these things that you have in mind that you want to do, right? And all the ways in which you've been hiding from it, all the ways in which you've been hanging back a little bit. I want you to write them down. I want you to find an easy thing, a medium thing, and a hard thing that you have been holding back on out of a fear of being rejected. And I want you to do the easy thing. I want you to do the easy thing. I want you to figure out at least what is step 1 of doing the easier thing. How can you support yourself through that? So to wrap this up, I want to remind you that the best relationships of my life have come from a place of intense vulnerability, and they've come with a high risk of rejection. But they are the most fulfilling, amazing things in my life. My greatest career joys in my life, which is this podcast and working with my clients, comes with a sense of rejection every single freaking day, every single social media post. And they are the things that get me to connect with my clients. And that is the work that I'm so grateful for because I love it. I love what I do. Rejection is an important part of life. Even though it feels soul destroying, it won't destroy you. You can get through it. And my dream for you is that you have taken some things from this episode and you learn to experience rejection in a new way. Rejection is a redirection. Rejection is a part of life, and it will lead you to exactly where you're meant to be. Having a fear of rejection is incredibly normal. It is something that every single human being faces on some biological level. Some people deal with it better than others. I'm over here living and breathing with a massive fear of rejection, living my life as best I can, and you can do this. If you're looking for support, if you want some accountability, some strategies, some tools, some processes, you know you've been hanging back, you know you've got some big dreams in your life for your relationships, for your career, for your whatever, for your health, just for your life in general to be more fulfilling. If you know, and this has been hitting home for you, that you want some support, I invite you to come and join the program Heal. So Heal is a 12-week one-to-one program where we go through learning and working with all of the parts of yourself that have been holding you back from being able to live the life that you really want. It's an incredible program that is filled with support and accountability, and it's also filled with a bunch of vulnerability in the middle. It's about revealing the parts of you that are the most afraid, but also the parts of you that are the most excited and capable for life. There's this amazing thing that happens inside of this program, and when we do parts work, and I call it parts transformation, and it's incredible to witness and to watch. There'll be a part within a client, a part of themselves that has a massive fear of rejection or abandonment, and as they learn to work with that part of themselves, as they learn to unpack that wound, as they learn to support that part and see that part and meet their own needs, something amazing happens where that part of them shifts into this sense of harmony, and they become this like glowing, magnetic, authentic version of themselves, and they live from that place, and they start meeting people who mesh with them. Like it's a hard thing as an adult to make really, really amazing friendships and to, make lasting relationships where we're your soulmates, like it's rare to have that, because we spend so much of our time protecting ourselves from rejection and putting on a mask and not letting people see who we really are. And inside of Heal and this program and doing this parts work, I've gotten to witness and to watch so many times people go from feeling either isolated or lonely, or feeling like their friends don't like them or even know them for who they are, and shifting into these really meaningful relationships where they're surrounded by people that love them for who they are. And that is everything. To your mental health, to your physical health, it transforms everything. And to be able to walk like that through life, priceless. So I'm going to put the link in the show notes for everything that we've spoken about today, including the parts work exercise and all the information on working together one-to-one. I'd love to hear from you about how you found this episode, and thank you so much for listening, for being here. Have the most beautiful day, and remember that you're doing enough always. You're not alone.